Welcome in, everybody. Today we're doing a deep dive on the murder of Jeff German. He was a veteran investigative reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Right. Yeah.
And this case, I think, is really interesting, not just because of the crime itself,
No.
but also because of the incredible work that was done by both German's colleagues
Right.
and also the women who initially contacted him for help. It's a story that kind of gets into
Yeah.
the whole idea of holding power accountable, but also the dangers that journalists face when they try to do that.
Yeah, it really is a multi-layered story. You've got the shocking murder of a journalist
Right.
in his own home, and that, of course, raises questions about the inherent risks of investigative reporting,
Yeah,
especially when you're dealing with powerful figures.
absolutely.
And then you have this added element of almost citizen detectives.
Right.
Both the women in the public administrator's office and the journalists at the Review-Journal who really took matters into their own hands.
Yeah, so to understand this story, I think we need to start with who Jeff German was.
Sure.
He was known for his really hard-hitting investigations,
Hmm.
uh, particularly into organized crime and government corruption. He had a long history of holding powerful people accountable.
That's right. And that commitment to truth and justice is what led him to cover the story of Robert Tells,
Correct.
the Clark County Public Administrator. Now, for those who might not be familiar with this role,
Yeah.
the public administrator is an elected official, and they're responsible for managing the estates of people who die without a will
Oh, okay.
or without family to kind of handle their affairs.
I see.
So German starts receiving these disturbing allegations about Tells
Okay.
from women who work in his office.
So these weren't like just minor workplace complaints?
No, not at all.
These women accused Tells of fostering like a hostile work environment. So for anyone who's not familiar with that legal term, that means that their workplace was just permeated with intimidation or abuse or offensive conduct that made it really difficult for them to do their jobs.
Right. And it's not just about isolated incidents, it's about a pattern of behavior.
Right, a pattern of behavior.
Right.
Okay.
And on the women's accounts, paint a very disturbing picture of what was going on.
So what kinds of things were they saying?
Well, they described feeling constantly monitored.
Okay.
Tellas allegedly even forbidding them from speaking to each other during work hours.
Really? Wow.
One woman, Jessica, even reported feeling so threatened and isolated that she considered taking her own life,
Wow.
hoping that such a drastic act would finally force the QC County to take action against Tellas.
That's awful. It really speaks to the level of desperation that these women were feeling.
It does.
They had formally complained. I mean, they'd gone through the proper channels,
Yes.
but they felt completely ignored and unheard.
Yeah.
So turning to Jeff German was really their last resort.
It really was, yeah. And this is where I think German's character really shines through.
Okay.
He didn't dismiss their claims.
Right.
You know, he didn't see this as just sort of office drama or petty squabbles.
Right.
He recognized that there was potential for a genuine abuse of power by an elected official.
Right.
And also he really saw the vulnerability of these women who were trapped in this toxic work environment.
So German was known for being a thorough investigator. I mean, he didn't just take the women at their word.
Oh, no. He dug deep.
He really tried to corroborate their stories and find evidence to support their claims.
Exactly.
And I understand he even found evidence suggesting a possible affair between Tellas and a subordinate named Roberta.
He did, yes.
And that probably fueled even more tension in the office.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can imagine how that would have added to the already difficult dynamic.
Right.
But tragically, this is where things take a really dark turn. On September 2nd, 2022, Jeff German was found murdered outside his home. He had been stabbed multiple times. Oh, wow.
This act of violence just sent shockwaves through the community, through the journalism world.
Right.
But it also sparked this incredible response,
Okay.
both from law enforcement and from German's own colleagues at the Review-Journal.
It's pretty amazing how these journalists just went above and beyond to investigate their friend's death.
It is.
I mean, they were using their skills in photography and research
Yeah,
and just their knowledge of the city
right.
to uncover these really critical pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. A key moment in the investigation involved the Review-Journal photographer Kevin Cannon,
Okay.
and he was analyzing surveillance footage
Okay.
from near German's home.
Okay.
And he noticed something distinct about the suspect's walk,
Mm.
what you call their gait.
Okay.
And it seemed familiar to him.
Okay.
So he went back through his own archives
Uh-huh.
of video footage.
Wow.
And lo and behold, he had previously filmed Robert Tells for a story.
And Tellys's walk in that older footage matched perfectly with the suspect's gait from the surveillance video.
That's incredible. I mean, they were able to link Tellys to the scene just by the way he walked.
Exactly. It really highlights the power of observation
Yeah.
and how these everyday skills honed through their profession
Right.
became tools for these citizen investigators.
Right.
And this wasn't the only instance. Another reporter used Google Earth,
Wow.
the tool that most people use for getting directions,
Yeah.
to analyze the area around the crime scene.
Okay.
And he identified a maroon SUV
Okay.
that had been spotted near German's home around the time of the murder, and he was able to connect that vehicle to Robert Tellys.
So you've got the women's initial accounts.
Yeah,
And then the Review Journal's own investigative work.
right.
And the police now have a very clear prime suspect, Robert Tellys.
They do.
So what happened when they searched his house?
Well, they found a number of items that just corroborated the evidence that was already mounting against Tellys.
Like what?
Shoes and a duffel bag,
Okay.
similar to those seen in the surveillance footage, were recovered.
Okay.
They even found pieces of a straw hat,
Really?
seemingly cut up
Huh.
in what could have been an attempt to destroy evidence.
Oh, wow.
But even more conclusive evidence was uncovered later.
What is that?
DNA analysis. Investigators found DNA under German's fingernails,
Wow.
and it matched Robert Tellys.
Oh, gosh. Wow, DNA under his fingernails. Given how brutal the attack was, I mean, that suggests there was a real struggle.
Exactly. German may have been trying to fight back in those final moments.
It's just such a tragic picture.
It is. And it was a real turning point in the investigation because it provided this very strong evidence
Yeah.
linking Tellys to the crime. But then the story takes another turn. Tellys agrees to an interview for the TV show 48 Hours.
Really?
Yeah. And he sits down with correspondent Peter Van Sant.
So how did he come across in the interview? I mean, did he seem shaken?
What's fascinating is that Tellys appears calm and collected throughout the whole interview.
Really?
Yeah. He just denies everything.
Wow.
Any involvement in German's murder. He insists that he's being framed, which of course raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, especially with all the evidence stacked against him. I mean, framed how? Did he offer any explanations?
He doesn't really give a concrete explanation for the DNA.
Oh.
He just insists that there's an explanation for everything
Okay.
and that he'll be able to prove his innocence at trial.
Wow, so he's claiming a conspiracy, but he doesn't give any specifics?
Not really. It's more just these broad claims.
What about the evidence found at his house? I mean, the shoes, the duffel bag, the pieces of the straw hat. Did he address any of that?
He claims that all of those items were planted as part of this frame-up.
Wow.
And keep in mind, Tellys is a lawyer himself.
Oh, right.
So he understands the legal system.
What?
He knows how to work it. And he seems to be betting on the idea that the prosecution won't be able to prove their case
Right.
beyond a reasonable doubt.
Even with all that circumstantial evidence.
Exactly.
So it sounds like his defense strategy really relied on creating enough doubt in the minds of the jury.
That seems to be it.
Did the 48 Hours episode give any insight into how he planned to do that?
Well, at the time, he was representing himself in court.
Okay.
So his specific strategy wasn't entirely clear. The episode ends with this sense of anticipation. Like, what's his next move going to be?
Right.
How is he going to explain all of this away?
Yeah.
And it really seemed likely that he would have to take the stand
Right.
to try and convince the jury.
Of his version of events.
Yeah.
This case obviously goes way beyond just Robert Tellys. It
Yeah.
raises a lot of concerns about the safety of journalists.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are just doing their job.
Yeah,
Investigating corruption, holding people accountable.
absolutely. Jeff German's death, it had this chilling effect on journalists across the country.
I bet.
It was a reminder of the risks that come with investigative reporting,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with powerful individuals.
More institutions.
Or institutions, right. And it really forced newsrooms to reevaluate their safety protocols
I imagine.
and consider, what are the potential consequences of their work.
It also makes you think about the courage of those women who initially came forward.
It does.
I mean, they risked their careers, their reputations to expose what they believed was wrongdoing.
Right. And their actions were critical
Yeah.
in getting German interested in the story in the first place.
Right. They were the catalyst for the whole thing.
Absolutely. They're the unsung heroes in this whole story.
Yeah.
Their willingness to speak up, even knowing they might face retaliation.
Yeah.
it really emphasizes how important it is to give a voice to the powerless,
Right.
to those who, feel like they can't speak up in the face of abuse or corruption.
Yep. Without their courage, who knows? Maybe Tellez would still be in office.
Who knows?
This story might never have come to light.
Exactly.
And then you have the Review Journal staff,
Right.
who even while they're grieving the loss of their colleague, they take it upon themselves to help uncover the truth.
It's remarkable.
I mean, they fought not only to bring German's killer to justice, but to protect his legacy.
Yeah. And the integrity of his work.
Yeah.
One of the most significant aspects of their efforts was this legal battle
Okay.
to prevent law enforcement from accessing German's files and sources after his death.
Interesting.
They argued that this would violate journalistic privilege,
Okay.
which is this cornerstone of press freedom.
Yeah.
It allows journalists to protect confidential sources
Right.
and make sure that information can flow freely.
Protecting sources is essential for journalists to be able to do their jobs effectively.
Yeah.
I mean, without that guarantee of confidentiality, people would be a lot less likely to come forward with information.
Absolutely. I mean, who would want to risk reprisals or exposure?
Right, exactly. So what happened?
Well, the Nevada Supreme Court ultimately sided with the Review Journal.
Okay.
And they ruled that law enforcement cannot search a reporter's devices after their death.
Wow.
This was a landmark decision.
Yeah.
It set a precedent
Right.
that really protects journalistic freedom
Yeah.
and the public's right to know.
That's huge. It's a hard-fought victory, but it came at a terrible cost.
It did. And Jeff German's murder, it serves as this stark reminder
Yeah.
of the dangers that investigative journalists face.
What are the broader implications of this whole case? I mean, what can we learn from all of this?
Well, it raises these fundamental questions
Okay.
about accountability,
Right.
transparency,
Yeah.
and the role of a free press
Of course.
in a democratic society. And it really underscores the need for vigilance
Yeah.
in protecting journalists
Uh-huh.
and making sure that people in positions of power
Right.
are held responsible for their actions.
It sounds like even though this Tellez case is about this specific instance of alleged corruption and this murder, it really touches on these much larger issues.
Exactly. It goes way beyond Las Vegas.
Right.
It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths
Yeah.
about the lengths that some will go to silence dissent
Right.
and the challenges faced by those who speak truth to power.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought. I mean, Jeff German, he really dedicated his life to exposing wrongdoing.
He did.
And ultimately, it cost him his life.
It's a real tragedy. But his work and the actions of those who sought justice,
Right.
they serve as this powerful reminder
Yeah.
about the importance of a free press
Yeah.
and the courage it takes
Yeah.
to hold those in power accountable.
We've talked a lot about the bravery of those women who came forward
Right.
and the determination of German's colleagues.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what can we, as everyday citizens,
Yeah.
learn from this case? How can we apply these lessons?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the power of speaking up.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard, even when it feels risky, those women in Tella's office, they could have stayed silent,
Right.
but they chose to come forward,
Yeah.
even though they knew they might face consequences.
Right.
And their actions made a difference. They
Yeah.
helped expose this potential abuse of power.
Right.
And they triggered an investigation that
Yeah.
might never have happened otherwise.
It's a good reminder that we all have a role to play
We do.
in holding those in power accountable,
Absolutely.
whether it's in our workplaces, our communities, or even at the national level.
Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be these grand gestures. Sometimes it's just paying attention
Yeah.
to what's going on around us,
Okay.
asking questions,
Right.
voicing concerns when we see something wrong.
Yeah.
It's about supporting those organizations that are dedicated to transparency and accountability.
Right.
Like, investigative journalism outlets, watchdog groups.
We've seen firsthand the impact that investigative journalism can have,
We have.
not just in uncovering wrongdoing, but also in setting those legal precedents, like that Nevada Supreme Court ruling protecting journalists' sources.
Exactly. So how can we support a free and independent press?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, supporting local newspapers,
Okay.
subscribing to online publications,
Right.
donating to nonprofit investigative journalism organizations.
Okay.
Those are all tangible ways to contribute.
So being more conscious about where we get our news from.
Yeah, and being discerning consumers of information.
Okay.
critically evaluating our sources,
Uh-huh.
calling out misinformation when we see it.
Right.
These are all important steps.
So it's about being active participants
Yes,
in the pursuit of truth, not passive bystanders.
that's it.
I think Jeff German's legacy and the actions of all those who fought for justice in his name
Yeah.
really remind us that a free press is not a given. It's something that we have to protect.
It is. It's a responsibility that falls on all of us.
That's a powerful message. So as you reflect on this case,
Mm-hmm.
think about, what stories in your own community need to be told.
Yeah,
What injustices need to be brought to light?
right.
And what role can you play in ensuring that those stories are heard? Maybe it's supporting your local journalists or attending those town hall meetings
Yeah.
or just having these conversations with your friends and family about these issues.
Exactly. Keep those conversations going.
Jeff German's story is a tragic one, but it's also a story about courage
Yes,
and resilience and the power of truth.
absolutely.
And I hope that his legacy will inspire us all to be more engaged citizens,
Yes.
to demand accountability
Uh-huh.
from those in power,
Yes.
and to never stop questioning,
Keep asking questions.
to never stop seeking the truth.